with a specific focus on inclusivity in the range of research. Thank you very much for being here. We got several topics to be covered at the moment in this session. So a question, so he might be able to deliver some of his thoughts about your question, including your topics of dissertation, thesis, and so on. So I'll try my best to translate his. I'll make sure that everything is kalau mau nanya silakan nanti saya akan
Thank you for having me today. So I will just speak in English. I'm Zebracki. Thanks for the introduction. I was born in Netherlands from Polish parents, and surname is Polish. Recognize some Dutch words for language. Well, let's move on to University of Leeds. Where I'm working as a professor in geography, and I will discuss some the context of our study of geography and kind of some student masters, possibly. So in terms of the rankings, School of Geography puts some human and physical geography aspects. So the linkages between the two. This time on the World for Geography in the US World University Rankings list, position 29, very much focused on research. So within human and physical geography, and it's considered a very strong research focus. Going to test this place. In terms of the master's programs, this is something that has not been on the mind of many students at UGM. Are following the programs. We see geographical information science, which offers on-campus, but it's also including online course, distant learning. And we have a MSc in urban data science and analysis. That is based on the University's campus, and in environmental data science and analytics. I will be explaining those programs in the following slides. For the requirements are not too onerous. Have a good degree, which in is 2.1 minimum degree in a relevant subject, so it's geography, environmental studies, but it could also be computer science, very quantitative, focus on quantitative research methods. And students with a strong technical and quantitative skills backgrounds are encouraged to apply for these programs. But we also recognize professional experience, so those who do not meet the standard requirements are also more than welcome to apply for these courses, and the assessment is based by case. Language requirements, there is the minimum IELTS 5 overall score, with 6 in listening, speaking, and reading, 6 in writing. Microphones, I think a better idea. So you're me better. So the employability of these programs is very high. Students careers where the use of GS in particular is expected. And we have context for each program that I will discuss. The overall director of postgraduate student education, so the director of Master of Science programs is Dr. Luke Burns. He's my colleague in the School of Geography who is sitting in the office next to me, not with me here today, but I'm presenting these promotional slides at our team. Let me start with the MSc in Geographical Information Science, the campus-based variant. It's a well-established program in our school, and it follows a long tradition of colleagues in the area of geographical information systems, as early as since the 1980s. It's a campus-based, we go full-time or part-time. There are fundamental courses, but also some more specialist modules. Modules is the term we use for course. And there are optional modules possible to tailor the course to fit your interest and ambitions. In these programs, or in this program, but in general, students can really focus on their own research interests and can dedicate their dissertation projects on what they find interesting. So students are typically not presented topics to choose from, but students can be are encouraged to be with their interest. The teaching is delivered really based on the research that the scholars are doing. So the research that I'm teaching is very strong. So I sort of really wish to the teachers are specialized about the topics they will be discussing. And for this program in particular, the geographical information science, the content is going to change. The slides we'll be able to circulate that after the event today, so this information ready. If you go to the next slide, please, we see the overview of the module. There are 3 semesters. The first semester starts in September, usually it's end of September and runs until January. Then the second semester is from January to May, to the summer period, and then there's a summer session semester 3, May to August. And in the first semester of the program, there are the compulsory modules, there's also, including the professional students and ability as well. And there's JS data visualization and analysis, followed by the second semester 4 modules in Ruang and digital image program, with analytics, geographics, analysis, semester. Students are expected to work on their dissertations. It's a 10,000 word individual research project where students are encouraged to apply their previous skills. If we move on to the next slides, we'll see the online variant. It's a program that was launched in September 2019, which was a good timing as then COVID kicked in, distant learning became standard. Also, this course was built on a long history of GIS open distance learning teaching at the University of Leeds. It's exclusively online and part-time over 3 years, and it's almost identical to the contents of the on-campus course. Module for that reason, doing this online only. And the program is flexible, as I said. The enrollment is onto the MSc course, but there are also fallbacks. So in case the program is not completed, you get a certificate or a postgraduate diploma, so that the credits do not get unrecognized. And in this module, there is a focus on core skills in geographical information, science, optional specialist modules that straddle areas of environmental, socio-economic, and technical dimensions of geography. The modules can be taken as continuing professional development units or standalone, either as a standalone training or as a build-up or secondary credits. The coordinator for this program is Roger Newton. And in the next slide, you can see how it is built up. In the first year, there are 4 modules, 60 credits. In the second year, it's 4 modules, again, 60 credits, where there's more options available. In the third year, solely focused on the dissertation. Next slide, please. And again, the slides will be circulated, so you can reuse them at your own leisure. This program is called Urban Data Science and Analytics, based on campus. It's combining understanding concepts in urban systems with technical training, data science, with urban data sets. Usually those data sets come from the teachers themselves or secondary data sets that are provided by partners. And the approach in this program is quote, things like an urban data scientist, unquote. You take an urban problem, find the relevant data, analyze it, and you produce outputs. So in that sense, it's very hands-on. In terms of the training, you'll get coding training in Python, where no prior experience is required. And there's lots of data that you're working with, and also the latest urban thinking, focused on urban issues, not only in the UK, but also based on the interests of students. And you will work collaboratively on real-world problems. So it's not only individual work, it's also team work involved. There are connections with real-world creative projects with industry, and these often run by the lecturers involved in this module, in this program. And it has an interface with actual research projects in our Leeds Institute for Data Analytics. And relations to current projects, but also provide these after the C program. And you have unique access to partners, data, and problems through the Consumer Data Research Center and various staff connections. The context here is my colleague, Dr. Vicky Poland, and the slides will be shared with you, and you can read more about this program via the link that is at the bottom of this slide. On the next page, we see the structure and the content of this program. So the compulsory module consists of 150 credits. So in the first semester, is programming for data science for practical applications, and analyzing cities. In the second semester, analytics for urban policy, creative coding for real-world problems, and in the summer period, the station project follows. The setup of the master program is different from our bachelor programs that we call undergraduate programs, in the sense that the summer period can be used for work on dissertation projects to make the completion of the program more feasible. And there are optional modules possible. One is urban transport analyst and those times 2 times 15 credits across the one semester one and then the second semester and the summer combined. Next slide, please. This is the Environmental Data Science Analytics MSc campus program. So the environmental domains, they include forests, deep seas, glacial areas, where colleagues of mine are doing research. And they provide experience in working with data sets that come from diverse field sources. Also, you will be working with the latest insight from research that will ensure contextual rigor. And here, the program will be underpinned by skills development in Python and standard process models project design, data science to ensure that important and relevant transferable skills are developed over the course. The analysis is appropriate, informed, and relevant, and there will be deployment of insights that are derived from environmental data, which is achieved through development of critical thinking skills that will be part of the curriculum. So the critical data analysis is very part of the program. There will be seminars, lectures, practice, program. So the next slide, please. In terms of the structure and content, in the first semester, there will be programming for data science for practical applications, and data science in multiple environments. In the second semester, there is a module creative coding for real-world problems, and 2 optional credit modules you can choose from, and then machine learning for environmental data. Also, the emerging artificial intelligence technologies will be part of concern in this program. In the summer period, there is the environmental data science project capstone, and will make the completion of the program. On the next slide, we will see the summary of the main contents of these programs. So each program has their as their main content. Our overall director, Dr. Birds, is also available to address any questions that you have. So these are the MSc programs. I suggest that we move on to the slide deck that provides scholarship possibilities for students to do a master's at the University of Leeds. Okay. So these international excellence scholarships, they really well. There is a very generous number of scholarships available for international students who want to do a master's in Leeds. And they are worth 10, 25, or 50% of tuition fees. So it's tuition fees only and not the foundation and other costs. So in that sense, it can be quite modest. So there's a differentiation between the discount that can be gained. The applications are currently open. On the next slide, you can see a bit more information about this. The applications should be made online. And the good thing is that we do not need to hold an offer of study to apply for the scholarship. And the awards will be assessed based on the academic and professional excellence that should transpire in the applications. And the criteria include the grades that have been achieved or predicted in your undergraduate degree. Sometimes the predicted grades are not provided for good reasons. So the focus is very much on facts. So what have you achieved? That's a good indicator for whether or not you're meeting that excellent material. But also excellent professional and personal skills, evidence through work, experience, extracurricular activities is recognized in the application process. And the deadline to apply, as you can see on the next slide, is 16 May at 5 p.m. UK time. And the outcome will follow in June. So this is a concrete opportunity case you're interested in applying for one of our master's courses. It could be one of the courses I've just introduced, but it could also be any other courses in Leeds. Leeds as a city, a student city, is of a lot of interest to international students, as the housing situation is a bit more favorable than other parts of the UK, particularly London, the Cambridge area, where the prices are skyrocketing. So students find it a very livable and walkable city. I would say do further search on Google to get to know what the university is like. Hafidz used to stay next to me, did a PhD project in our school. I happen to be the co-supervisor, and maybe you can tell a little bit more about what it was to live in Leeds, apart from the cold in the rain.
Yeah, so I'll try to tell them about this and along with your
Yes, any questions?
Oke, teman-teman, jadi ini sebenarnya beliau mau mencoba promosi gitu ya. Jadi untuk yang tertarik untuk S2, ada beberapa jurusan yang untuk GIS bisa di kampus, bisa online. Yang kedua tadi urban analytics yang suka dengan isu-isu perkotaan, atau environmental analytics yang tadi masalah isu-isu lingkungan yang lebih luas seperti pedesaan gitu. Nah, untuk ini ada kesempatan beasiswa di cover paling setengah dari tuition fee, 50% dari komponen kuliahnya. Jadi mungkin kalau teman-teman ada yang tahu lumayan banyak gitu, ya lumayan gitu bisa apply beasiswa ini gitu. Kalau untuk itu ya harus beberapa pengalaman teman-teman di sana yang show untuk kita pakai cuma diskon tuition fee-nya aja dan bisa bertahan hidup sampai sekarang. Nggak tahu teman-teman, tapi bisa. Tapi maksudnya affordable gitu. Ya overall sama aja, kayak masalah biaya hidup lumayan kurang dibandingkan dengan kota-kota lain di Eropa atau di UK, jadi bisa lah gitu. Apa pakai kalau yang punya duit itu ya maksudnya nggak mahal-mahal banget. Untuk yang punya duit, kalau nggak punya duit ya mahal. Oke, so great. Mari kita coba action.
Well, so in case there are interesting lot of programs, like the both information, then you can certainly slides within the way. Yes, exactly. Great.
Oke, ya begitu saja teman-teman tentang promosi. Kita lanjut ke intinya. Nah, kita kali ini akan ada lecture dari Martin tentang citizenship dan identity, dan bagaimana menerjemahkan konsep-konsep ini menjadi sebuah tulisan. Okay, so Martin, so where is time for yours?
Thank you.
Let's move on to the lecture.
Oh, yeah. It works, yes. So yeah, I just did some promotion of our programs, and I'm happy to move on to the work that I'm doing within the school. I'm a quantitative geographer by training. BCNC and PhD degrees from Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Then 2013, I moved to the University of Leeds to continue my teaching research in the area of green geography. And my focus has always been on identity issues. My PhD was about the planning and perception of artworks in public space, so it's situated within cultural geography. That's a little bit specific to talk about today, but in this taster talk, I will discuss some fundamental ideas that I am teaching about in our School of Geography in Leeds. The course is called Citizenship and Identity Comparative Perspectives. Next slide, please. It's a field where a lot of books and articles have been written about. Next slides. And for today, I will discuss citizenship and identity, what those terms mean, and I will discuss three important perspectives of citizenship. One is the liberalism perspective, focused on the individual. The second one is communitarianism, which is focused on the collective. And I will discuss group versus individual rights and the tensions between individuals and groups. And I will proceed then to the perspective of radical democracy. In particular, it's a difficult term, agonistic pluralism that is focused on conflict as a way forward. So it's important to agree to disagree in democracy to make sure that differences, social differences, are acknowledged. And then we move on to recapitalization and then short questions, answers, slots. And in the second part of request from Hafidz, we'll be focusing on writing on qualitative research, focusing on how you go about research that involves social identities and citizenship, and in particular. And I would also be interested in knowing what you will be what you are working on, and also questions you might have, in particular regarding the use of qualitative data components in your studies. Next slide. Maybe you can say a few lines that I will that we will have in content as they are
Oke, jadi jadi ada beberapa tiga perspektif dari kita keluarga manusia.
Recording in progress.
Mahasiswa sekalian, tim admin mungkin bisa memberikan beberapa poin-poin penting dalam melakukan penelitian atau menulis penelitian mahasiswa Bapak Ibu sekalian.
Terima kasih. Next slide, please. Oh, previous slide. Sorry. Yes. So what is citizenship? Yeah, it's a very fundamental question about who we are, to whom we belong, in what place we feel ourselves. So yeah, what is citizenship to begin with, and who gets to become a citizen, who defines it, and how, and where is citizenship practiced? Those are some questions that feed my presentation today. Citizenship is multi-layered. Getting to the formal definition of it. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, yes. Thank you. it's this quotation from Lewis and Chester sums up a very formal definition of citizenship, where the legal position of people is acknowledged. So, in other words, you have a passport, you have a certain nationality, but do you define your nationality or your citizenship based on that formal citizenship only, or is there more to say? So just to give myself an example, I was born and raised in the Netherlands from Polish parents. I've been influenced by cultural and social values from Polish society while living in the Netherlands, and moved to a new country about 10 years ago. I'm working and living in England right now. Still have family and friends, mostly in Belgium, the Netherlands, but also across the world. So I would say my citizenship, although I'm traveling with a Dutch passport, which is my formal nationality, and so my formal citizenship, I got a lot of other cultural influences and identities that make up who I am. But if you look at the jure of citizenship, so how the state is viewing our citizenship, we come closer to this definition that we see on this slide. I'm going to read out this quotation. In its most straightforward sense, citizenship is understood as bestowing upon individuals as a legal status and members of a national polity, enacted by state apparatus and defended by legal and administrative rules and regulations. As a member of the polity, individuals are entitled to certain political, civic, economic, and social rights, including individual freedom of speech, the right to property, the right to vote, and the right to live according to the prevailing standards of society, regardless of race, sex, or social class. At the same time, these rights are accompanied by a reciprocal set of obligations to the collectivity so that the rights of others can be secured. Unquote. In this definition, there's this assumption that yes, we are granted citizenship, but in return we do have certain responsibilities. So in society, we should all be treated equally. Although in some legislations, some minorities are not treated equally. So this has not universal value. But you do not only have rights, you also have responsibilities to act within legislation. It is a formal approach to citizenship. Moving at least in case you want to make any comments in Indonesia, then we do so.
Citizenship ini didefinisikan sebagai dokumen formal yang kita miliki. Dan sekarang Bapak Ibu dan Mas Mbak sekalian, ditanya orang mana, dia KTP ya. Tapi padahal kan kalau misalnya kita meninjau lebih jauh, kita mungkin bukan orang Jogja, tapi kita berKTP Jogja. Gitu. Tapi ada hal-hal yang memang melekat pada diri kita sebagai kebiasaan, sebagai lain-lain itu. Pengakuan secara formal ini kemudian berimplikasi kepada hal-hal sosial yang mungkin kita bertanggung jawab. Misalnya kalau teman-teman tinggal di Jogja, maka harus ikut kebiasaan orang Jogja.
There are two levels of citizenship. So we go to the next slide, yes. So the jure citizenship is formal way of viewing citizenship. Can also be classified as a normative understanding, defined by Smith as citizenship refers to the relationships between individuals and the community which impinges on their life because who they are and where they live, unquote. So in this definition, the formal citizenship status means that you have certain privileges within society, but also applies to who you are, a citizen of a specific state. You have access to certain benefits, of health insurance, unemployment insurance. So this is really about this formal citizenship status. Next slide, please. And the formal citizenship status is important in the context of neoliberalism, where there's a strong focus on the individual, seen by Mark Burnett as, quote, privileging the rights of individual, autonomous, private citizens, downloading responsibilities for welfare to individual citizens, limiting participation opportunities for meaningful participants, participation by citizens, granting members of different groups building rights, so-called graduated citizenship, in exchange for different behaviors, conditional citizenship, and struggles for certain rights and duties in space, participation, and belonging. So again, this quotation boils down that there are certain rights, but also responsibilities. There are expectations how we should behave in this normative notion of citizenship. But there's also another level of citizenship, the way how we desire to present ourselves, to perform ourselves in society. And the next slide is showing the de facto citizenship. Formal one, this is the de facto citizenship, which should be defined as follows, as Louise and Chester explained, quote, we should see citizenship not as automatic entitlement for all those bestowed with the legal status of belonging to a nation, but as something enacted, performed, and increasingly conditional on the ability of individuals to conduct themselves in a way that is deemed morally and ethically responsible and unbiased. So there's more to this everyday way we make sense of our position in society. And also, we might express ourselves in ways that is not fitting the norm of society. And here we come down to discussion about marginalized populations, people who are falling out of place, falling out of the norms along religious, age, gender and sexuality norms.
Oke, so jadi ada sebuah cara pandang lain bahwa kita secara fakta, tadi kan secara formal ya, secara faktual kita ingin menunjukkan jadi diri kita sendiri. Misalnya teman-teman memang berasal dari, ya mungkin sering mendengar berita ya, kalau membaca berita teman-teman misalnya ada beberapa mahasiswa atau beberapa warga Jogja yang mungkin secara formal dia orang Jogja, tapi berasal dari daerah lain. Mungkin yang agak ekstrim mungkin berasal dari misalnya Maluku, misalnya berasal dari beberapa lokasi di Indonesia Timur. Nah, dari satu sisi mereka secara formal mungkin KTP-nya di sini dan ingin dan bertanggung jawab itu dalam tanda kutip mengikuti tata cara kehidupan di sini. Tapi di sisi lain mereka punya identitas yang ingin mereka atau kita tonjolkan sebagai daerah asal kita. Jadi kembali lagi ke pertanyaan, Anda ini orang mana? Ini kan bisa kita jawab macam-macam.
Next slide, please. So discuss de facto citizenship and this de facto citizenship relates to substantive citizenship. So you can have formal citizenship and nationality, but what citizenship means in fact, in reality, in practice, in time and space. So legal rights for citizens, they not all global applicability. So when we look at issues around women, disabled people, children, immigrants, for instance, it's a very patchy picture, and the legal rights certainly not apply everywhere the same. So citizenship and the associated rights are also geographical questions. They are conferred at different levels. So think about local laws, regional laws, state laws, and also within Indonesia, if you look at regional differences. So if you look at a conservative region, Aceh, for instance, but the situation is different from the way different communities are recognized in Bali. So also within states, you should differentiate between skills where citizenship is enacted. Citizenship is a reflection of the society in a way, and there can be a tension between the normative and the substantive conceptions that highlight the complexity of citizenship. So, who in the first place ascribes citizenship rights, and how is citizenship ascribed? That's the question here. So, that there is this legal way, formal way of looking at citizenship, but in everyday life, there are unwritten norms that will reveal citizenship in other ways, and those are the facto citizenship ways. Next slide, please. And next slide. Citizenship and identity combined. In the next the quotation, it shows how the two should be seen in relation to each other. Eisen and Wood, who are citizenship scholars, define it as follows, quote, the affinity between citizenship and identity is that they are both group markers. Citizenship marks out the members of a polity from another, as well as members of a polity from non-members. Identity marks out groups from each other, as well as allowing for the constitution of groups as targets of assistance, hatred, animosity, sympathy, or allegiance. As group markers, the difference between citizenship and identity is that, while the former carries legal weight, the latter carries social and cultural weight, unquote. So the interesting paradox here is that when you feel a member of the community, so when you're included, you exclude all others. So the process of inclusion is very interesting. As when you can define, when you identify your own identity, you draw the border somewhere and you mark yourself out from others. So there's always a very interesting process going on. And we find our identity, especially in space, it's a process of bordering, but at the same time also of othering. So the social difference is something that is of primary concern in identity making. Next slide, please. Theodore Marshall is a very important figure when it comes down to a modern approach to citizenship, and individuals should be seen within the group. Smith defined citizenship in the following way. Quote, citizenship refers to the relationship between individuals and the community, which depends on the life because of where they live. You see this before. Individuals, the individual is socially conditioned and which is made up of several individuals who might have competing interests. As we have seen, members of the state have certain duties, but also rights and benefits. And the modern history of the concept should be seen in post-Second World War England, in this case, where following the end of the Second World War, the communities and societies had to be rebuilt, and citizens had to be given basic guarantees and benefits. So the state expected citizens to work for the rebuild of the country, and in return they would be guaranteed an income and also health benefits, and the birth of the welfare state was there. Second, the following slide. Marshall, also known for the Marshall Plan in Western Europe, the rebuild of Europe. There's this work on citizenship and social class, where citizenship should be seen as a quote status bestowed on all those who are full members of the community, unquote. And here citizenship should be outlined as follows, where we have civil and legal rights, so rights and duties according to nation states laws, so rights to own property, freedom of speech, and marriage equality. Political rights, so people have the right to participate in political processes, so they can vote and have an influence in decision making, and social rights, so the rights to basic level of well-being, independence of individual labor. So again, the example of job seekers allowance and pensions that people can get. Next slide. So in this definition, we see links to liberalism and liberal democracies. And liberalism here means being free, freedom, being open, being tolerant. And liberal democracy, which has been dominating both Second War in Europe, in particular the United States, Western world, has seen an emphasis on individual rights. Where the rule of law is central and where the system of government is decided by electors or voters. Working. So I raise my own voice, where there are systems of government that are decided by electors and voters. And here the individual is placed central of citizenship rights. Next slide, please. So the individual is very important in a post for the focus on the individual in the post-war project. There was industrialization, part of the pre-globalization, moved to strengthen the economies by industrial efforts. Was also situated in a working class England, where the rights of the workers had to be protected, and it was an era where social democratic states were built up. The next slides. However, there were some critiques, as this way of seeing citizenship is a bit egocentric. It's difficult to apply to other contexts. It also focuses on man being the leaders in the economy, so there's a patriarchal society that is assumed. And also, identity has not been a strong concern in this conceptualization. Identity is more dynamic. However, this modern approach to citizenship sees identity as quite static. And also, in a neoliberal society, social rights have been declining. So it's very difficult to live up to the promises of pensions and of and it's very aspirational in the sense that seeks to extend rights more equally, but it does not capture reality or guarantee equality. So equality issues are still prevalent in practice. In the next slide, there we find a summary of some key verbs here. So in this way of thinking, there are some procedural dimensions that relate to courts, legal body, law enforcement, and administrative issues. Normative, as we've discussed, is about establishing, relating, or deriving from a standard or a norm. So what is citizenship ought to do? It's citizenship or nationality, for instance. But there's also the substantive dimension, looking at people's lived realities. They may show a different picture, a more ordinary picture. So what we see in the substantive way, the substantive definition of citizenship is a fusion of the normative, procedural, and substantive dimensions, where citizenship is both a status and a social position in society, seen in that way. And it's multidimensional, intersectional, so it's not only focusing on one identity, so nationality, for instance, but it also includes age, abilities, religion, geographical origin, you name it. So it's very intersectional and it impinges on our social relations. Next slide. So in the modern understanding of citizenship, citizenship is implied, it implies universal and inclusive values, but in practice, so if you look at the more substantive stories, some people might fall out of the norm. Think of women, indigenous groups, traveling people, for instance, but also children. Children cannot vote, for instance. Why so? So when we look at normative relationships, substantive conceptions, they highlight the complexity of citizenship. Geographers have been making very interesting contributions in terms of case studies on citizenship and identity, and I will mention some of them later. Next slide, please. So in the liberal perspective, we see a focus on the individual, where the bearer of the rights is the individual and the grantor is the nation state. And citizenship necessitates specific rights to protect the individual. So there are anti-discrimination legislations. In different countries, they might have unequal outcomes. This liberalism view has been challenged because a pure focus on the individual ignores a very important reality that society naturally comprises multiple communities and groups with distinct differences, and also what about groups of people who collectively mobilize themselves to gain group recognition. So also that needs acknowledgement. Next slide. Skip. Next slide, please. We skip this slide and move on to the next slide. To the communitarian perspective, that challenges the liberal perspective that I just discussed. Is there anything you'd like to add? Yeah, sure.
Oke, nah ini sedikit aja. Jadi memang konsep citizenship atau warga negara itu pertama kali muncul saat Perang Dunia Kedua, saat memang kehancuran di mana-mana kita mencoba negara-negara di Eropa mencoba membangun kembali negaranya, lalu muncul pertanyaan, siapa sih keluarga negara kita? Gitu. Apakah yang tinggal di sini, apakah yang lahir di sini, atau siapa? Nah, ini kan kemudian akhirnya muncul konsep-konsep citizenship. Di satu sisi, konsep warga negara ini yang melekat ini memberikan hak kepada tiap orang atas layanan-layanan negara. Jadi kesempatan untuk bekerja, uang pensiun, beberapa hal tentang insentif layanan publik gitu, yang tidak dimiliki oleh warga negara lain. Tapi di sisi lain, ini ternyata tidak berlaku untuk semua. Ada beberapa marginalized kelompok-kelompok yang termarginalisasi tidak mendapatkan hal ini. Contoh, misalnya warga negara Indonesia boleh beli tanah gitu. Kan boleh ya, sebagai warga negara Indonesia kita boleh beli tanah. Tapi ada warga negara Indonesia yang keturunan Tionghoa misalnya, hidupnya nggak boleh. Kan, jadi ada sebuah identitas yang mengeksklusifkan sebuah kelompok grup dari layanan-layanan kenegaraan. Ini mungkin konflik yang selama ini kita pikirin progresif, tapi masih sedikit orang yang mau menelitinya. Dalam perspektif liberal tadi, memang menekankan pada kebebasan itu. Jadi saat seorang memiliki status kewarganegaraan, maka dia harus bebas, harus memiliki liberalisme tidak sesuai dengan koridor kenegaraan itu. Walaupun ada batasan-batasan tertentu. Ya, tadi contohnya wanita, contohnya mungkin anak-anak nggak boleh nyoblos. mungkin ras-ras tertentu. Jadi pandangan ini kemudian di-challenge oleh komunitarian perspektif yang akan digunakan selanjutnya.
So on the other hand, we have the communitarian perspective, where the individual is still recognized as being a bearer of rights, but in this perspective, individuals should always be seen as situated and embedded within social groups. Next slide. Next slide again. So groups should be there should be a stronger focus on groups, but also how different groups make different claims on society. And the question here raises around how should different groups get potential recognition at group levels? In other words, should there be something as group differentiated rights, and to what extent does that relates to issues around equality and inclusion, as it might have exclusive outcomes. Next slide, please. It was coined by sociologist Charles Taylor, where the importance of different group knowledges and values was recognized, and how they affect how people are positioned in the public sphere. So when groups have different views of social and cultural values, there might be tension. So it's important to understand different positions and values of groups, and there should be mutual recognition of different interests and values, and which might be conflicting. Next slide, please. And in order to have yourself as a group recognized, it's important to empower yourself, to have a very good voice as a group, but also to have enough political influence to veto any policies that affect the group. So if you're a group, especially marginalized group of society, you want to have this political power to veto any policies. And sometimes there's accommodation within reasonable limits. So in case law, as a group, you can have accommodating rights. So an example we can think of is gender segregated areas in society where discrimination against gender discrimination is are an example. So out of the problem, gender and sexual harassment towards women, there has been some advocate for women only beaches, and it was like allowed within the legislation that is still supporting anti-gender discrimination in society. So accommodation within reasonable limits is sometimes possible without being at variance with the law. Next slide, please. And being recognized sometimes also means taking up space. Groups are usually on the margins of society, especially marginalized groups, and that they can have like a politics of resistance to stated claims to citizenship. And we have seen that, for instance, all kinds of protests in the Western world, transgender protests have been very prevalent about like how binary the society is and how it should be challenged. But also violence against women, for instance, has been a global problem. Also regarding disabilities, we cannot hear me speaking now, but people who are deaf, for instance. What about people living with disabilities? How do they move on society? How should their rights be recognized and accommodated? So think of deaf communities, but also people who are living separately based on their sexual and gender identity, LGBT places, for instance, neighborhoods that you can find in in Western, the global north. And then everyday performance and identity, the way we talk, the way we behave, and so on, can also challenge norms in society and change expectations about spaces and how we use them. Next slide, please. Skip this slide. So when people, individuals or groups go against the norm, you can speak of counterparts, and it can happen in several places. It could be in your community, it could be at home, could be in public space, could be university, could be online. So there are different geographies of resistance. And often people congregate together to make their points across. So in order by doing so, you develop a sense of identity and belonging. And by organizing yourself, you can subvert public discourses, but also you can show the visibility of marginalized groups within society. And new claims can follow, which could lead to an allocation and distribution of social resources. If there would have not been an ongoing struggle for women's rights, there would not have been a position for women in, for instance, Western societies to vote. So all efforts in terms of rights recognition comes out of activism and making claims on about rights in society. Next slide. I will skip this slide for the sake of timekeeping. I'd like to discuss a view that combines this liberalism and communitarian perspective and the radical democracy point of view from the Belgian philosopher Chantal Mouffe, who argued that we as individuals are neither self-regarding nor socially constituted. So within a condition of postmodernity, we should see ourselves as having multiple identities which are not fixed. They change over spaces and over lifetimes. And there are new forms of identification in context of globalization and by being exposed to other identities and people. And also think of global issues like climate change and how they affect ecological and global citizenships. So the critique was that other approaches risk dangers of essentialism, meaning solely focused on the individual or the collective, where some groups are always privileged over others. Next slide, please. And we go to the subsequent slide. Thank you. So in this notion, agonistic pluralism, Chantal Mouffe wanted to introduce a new way to think about democracy, away from traditional liberal conceptions of democracy as a negotiation among interests. So not consensus is important in democracy, it's about dissensus, that you agree to disagree. So conflicts, showing conflicts and understanding views of people, sometimes they are diametrically opposite from each other, is important to move on. So it's not about leaving aside particular interests, but acknowledging that there might be different views of the world, different interests, but still you need to reach to a decision and move on to society. And this reality, Chantal calls agonistic pluralism, conflict and dissensus as being the core elements of democracy, rather than trying to have an all-policing resolution.
Oke, tadi masalah konteks komunitarianism perspektif dalam melihat citizenship, dia challenge teori teori bahwa orang itu bebas bertindak dalam koridor kewarganegaraan. Mereka bebas, walaupun mereka bebas dalam perspektif komunitarian ya itu, orang itu embedded, gitu. Orang itu dia terikat kepada society di mana dia berada, sehingga hak-hak dan kewajiban dia itu menurut mengikuti nilai-nilai atau norma-norma di mana dia berada. Misal kalau dalam contoh Indonesia ya, lagi harusnya kan semua warga negara itu bebas untuk mendirikan misalnya usaha apapun. Tapi di Jogja enggak sebebas itu. Ada beberapa misalnya orang yang mau mendirikan usaha tempat hiburan malam ternyata ditolak oleh masyarakatnya. Jadi kan sebenarnya kalau kita lihat dari perspektif neoliberalisme ya ini kan menghalangi hak-hak orang untuk berusaha. Tapi kan di challenge bahwa ya memang kalau tidak sesuai dengan nilai-nilai dari society-nya dia ya memang begitu. Jadi memang ada keterbatasan. Nah, di perspektif yang ketiga, makanya tadi ada politik of recognition. Jadi bagaimana memang grup-grup yang dalam dirugikan, mereka itu melakukan gerakan untuk direkognisi, untuk dilihat bahwa mereka itu ada. Jadi untuk hak-haknya dipahami. Misalnya masyarakat adat dalam hal kewarganegaraan, maka yang berhak dengan tanah-tanah misalnya beberapa hal itu masyarakat yang memiliki sertifikat misalnya. Tapi kan kalau misalnya di tanah adat, ya masyarakat adat merasa butuh untuk mereka itu ada, sehingga mereka hak-hak mereka juga yang mereka anggap tanah adat itu bisa diperhatikan. Sehingga nanti mampu untuk mengubah sebuah tatanan institusi, mengubah sebuah tatanan regulasi sehingga memang akhirnya kan diperkenalkanlah undang-undang masyarakat ada. Jadi prosesnya seperti itu. Nah, ada ke perspektif ketiga yang menggabungkan kedua perspektif ini, yakni agonistik pluralisme. Jadi bagaimana pluralisme atau keberagaman atau berbedanya sudut pandang grup of community itu di acknowledge gitu. Jadi kita melihat demokrasi itu bukan sebuah konsensus terhadap sesuatu, bukan sebuah kita sepakat akan suatu hal, bukan, tapi merupakan proses proses diulang intinya gitu, diulang untuk hak siapa yang diutamakan sejauh mana dan hak mana yang memang nanti sepakat untuk tidak sepakat gitu. Jadi dalam melihat demokrasi tidak selamanya kita satu pendapat, tapi kita itu bersepakat untuk berbeda pendapat, ya, seperti itu.
Next slide, please. So it's important to if there's these are technical, like if we open the newspapers or conflicts across the whole world, some are even worse than others. But the importance is to allow for the possibility that conflicts may appear and to find an arena where differences can be confronted. And the democratic process should supply that, and which is not always possible. Next slide, please. It is in the notion of agonistic pluralism, there's a critique of the viewpoints regarding liberalism and communitarianism. They're too much focused on state and economy. And Chantal argued that it's the individual and social ties, that's where the political lies. So radical democracy goes beyond typical institutions of citizenship, global governments, decision-making processes that take place around the round table. But there are more spaces where the power can be challenged. Next slide, please. An example of that are so-called flash mobs. The question is like a flash mob where people go up the street and form something, like in this case, in Sydney, there was this event that people showed up at a train station and pretended they were all there, so government there, so and the question here is that, well, is organized informally, is this a form of radical democracy? So when we analyze this question geographically, we say yes, it could be seen as a form of radical democracy. Is people trying to make statements of political way, but it might not be understood by bystanders. So in that sense, it might not be seen as something democratic. It might be, on the other hand, seen as radical democracy because no authority was given, permission was given by authorities to do this. Or you could say, well, no, it's not radical democracy. It's a group action. It's something communitarian. And contrary, you could say, well, radical democracy, yes, it is because it gets attention and spreads the world, and this has been mediated all across the world. So it makes the radical points come through in the public sphere. Next slide, please. And we've also seen this in the Occupy movement. So the 99% is we're fighting against 1% of the world population that is 1% of the holding the capital in the world. And a lot of protests and took place in public streets to fight against this economic hegemony. Next slide, please. So what we've seen are different development sectors of citizenship, approaches, specifically in terms of recognition, redistribution. We discussed liberalism, focus on individual, communitarianism, that is critical of liberal conceptions of self-regarding individuals. Individuals should be seen as situated in communities. Next slide, please. And we discussed the view that merged the liberalism and the communitarianism perspectives on the notion of radical democracy, where identity should not be seen as fixed. They're just intersecting subject positions. Space of democracy go beyond those defined by the states, and social relations should always be seen as central to analyzing citizenship. And importantly, the possibility for conflict should be seen as an important part of democracy. And so this is what we discussed in this taster lecture today. Please over to you. And following slide, we'll discuss writing on qualitative research in relation to these topics.
Thank you so much, Martin, for the lecture. So, you guys, I think, have any questions about the topic? Ada yang mau nanya nggak? Lanjut ke masalah teknis penulisan. Okay, so I don't think there will be any question about this topic because I know that I will be the press for. So yeah, thank you so much for introducing this kind of topic. I'm interested for each of the research and the scores. And I will proceed to the next.
Very much. Yes, so I wanted to present something about something that I do every research on, so I appreciate that based on you, or if you might have some questions, feel free to address them later. I want to move on to the next slide. He's talking about some potential interest among you regarding how to go about writing on qualitative research. There's not so much specific literature on writing on qualitative research specifically, but some helpful works are INA's qualitative research methods, human geography, and there's also the work by Harry at Walcott on writing on qualitative research. So what I'm going to do in the following slides is to explain a bit more about qualitative research and also how you can go about writing on research that deals with qualitative data. Next slide, please. This tree, image of a tree, I used from the work of Walcott, where we can see that there are so many qualitative methods. Very common methods are interviews, but also observations. But in this tree, we see a lot of other methods that are maybe a bit less known. Literary criticism, archival strategies, microethnographies, conversation analysis. But the words that are highlighted, interviews and observations, field work with field observations, those are particularly important. And in qualitative research, scholars often tend to find data on the topic without the need to draw generalized conclusions out of it. So viewpoints from a certain community are analyzed, and the conclusions that relate to how views within a community relate to each other, rather than say, well, I've done the research, and this is what the population thinks. So in qualitative research, there is a way, scholars trying to stay away from anything overgeneralizations. Next slide, please. So the methods and techniques, they define very much how we go about writing our qualitative research findings. But as in any type of research, it's important for us to make very clear what the research question is. It's a research question in which you articulate your key terms. You also dictate in a way the kind of methodologies you're going to use. And also it's important to make clear what kind of epistemology you're using. For instance, realism, is it post-structuralism, is it positivism, which is important to how you see the world and the data you collect within the world. And also your research niche. You want to make sure that you do something that contributes to certain literature, scholarship. So what kind of gap are you going to fill? And that will be followed by, as you know, a structured literature review on key debates, and it could be related to my question, to my lecture on citizenship and identity, on the intersection of space and place for social identities. And this should be followed by a discussion around the identification and justification of methods of study. So the question is always, why are we doing what we're doing? So why interviews, for instance, why observations, for instance, and also what has been the sampling strategy. A very a lot of qualitative research is based on convenience sampling. So if you want to, for instance, if you want to do a study of how local policymakers think about sustainable energy transitions in the city of Jakarta, for instance, you can have a other key policymakers. But it might be very difficult to get to speak to all of them. Sometimes you need to speak to one and they refer you to another. So kind of like snowball sampling, which is a form of convenience sampling. So those things need to be explained with as much detail as possible when we're talking about qualitative research. And also transferability. Well, qualitative research is not focused on generalizing. It might be transferable. So you might be working on a case study that could have applications to other contexts. You're not making claims that your study will have applicability to other contexts, but then you can provide opportunities to learn. So a case study is an opportunity to learn for other contexts. And also in the explanation of the methods, you tell why you pursue a certain data collection, data analysis. And a lot of research, also in quantitative research, we're interested in discourses. One very common is a discourse analysis. So we are often interested in hearing what different key people on a topic think about it. Could be secondary research, but if you collect primary research data, You could have interviews, and in those interviews, stories are told stories are told about the topic, and you want to analyze it, and so what kind of discourse, what kind of themes are important. And you might not only stay with interviews, you might also want to do some, for instance, observations or social media analysis. And the findings of all these different methods, you could relate to each other, and that's what we call triangulation. So how the different methods sit together. And what's moreover important in qualitative research, more often than in quantitative research, is positionality. So how does your role as a researcher influences the data interpretation? So if you are an insider of a certain community, you might have better access to respondents, or you might have a better understanding of certain topics. So then an explanation of your own position is important. And as in any study, ethical issues around confidentiality and guaranteeing anonymity of respondents is very important to reflect upon in the description of the methods of your study. Obviously, you want to say anything about you wrong? Yes.
Oke, teman-teman, jadi memang ada perbedaan yang sangat berbeda dalam riset kualitatif ini. Ada beberapa hal yang mungkin tadi mention, artinya klarifikasi di awal tentang penulisan kualitatif. Yang pertama memang generalisasi merupakan suatu hal yang memang dihindari dalam riset kualitatif, sehingga memang kita fokus menjelaskan sebuah fenomena, tapi juga mengaplikasikan kesimpulan kepada populasi yang lebih luas. Tapi hanya memang kita membuka opportunity untuk topik ini dibahas di konteks yang lain. Yang kedua, memang harus diklarifikasi kebaruan dari riset ini terikat pada konteks apa. Misalnya dalam konteks tertentu ya memang oke, ini suatu hal yang baru, tapi dalam konteks lain misalnya di responden yang lain yang ini mungkin berbeda yang banyak dibahas. Terus posisi peneliti juga harus diklarifikasi di awal. Misalnya kalau memang kita meneliti tentang isu-isu misalnya tentang wanita, perempuan. Nah, yang menulis itu perempuan juga. Jadi akan ada bias dalam menganalisis. Itu harus diklarifikasi. Misalnya perempuan yang seperti apa, saya ini perempuan yang seperti apa, sehingga saya menganalisis, saya melihat harusnya misalnya relasi gender itu seperti apa. Jadi memang harus diklarifikasi di awal sehingga memang jelas hasil kesimpulan yang dihasilkan dari penelitian itu dari perspektif siapa. Nah, terus harus di awal. Lalu bagaimana ya akan yang diwawancara itu siapa saja, perannya apa, informasi apa yang didapatkan dari mereka itu apa saja, dan prosesnya bagaimana. Karena proses ini menentukan yang pertama satu keterbukaan orang terhadap informasi yang nanti akan dia share kepada kita. Terus proses kita menentukan siapa yang akan diwawancara, nah itu menjadi suatu hal yang penting untuk memberikan background knowledge bagi pembaca bagaimana sebuah penelitian ini prosesnya sampai sebuah kesimpulan itu dihasilkan. Dan tadi masalah etik juga penting, hal-hal mengenai informasi pribadi responden, bagaimana hak-hak mereka tetap dijaga rahasianya. Nah, ini harus ya kita pertimbangkan dari awal.
Terima kasih. Next slide. So in the finding sections after we discuss methods, so we write up qualitative research, we present our issue, the raw findings. So quotations show how the findings are drawn from those from them. It's important to clarify the themes, so we can structure the findings, think of the main themes that come out of the analysis, and how are they connected, how are they situated in broader geographical social context. So when I was discussing about citizenship and identity, for instance, I was talking about how people perform their citizenship, which is more the level of the body in space. It could be the home, could be the community, region, nation, could also be online. And in the finding section, it's important as well for qualitative research to provide very detailed descriptions of context and experiences of participants. That's all called thick description. So it should not only be a few lines of the quotation of a participant that you drop in the text. You always need to explain what the relevance of that voice is. And also making sure there's an adequate balance between the voices of the participants. So if you're using interview-based materials, make sure there's a good balance between the quotations, but also the analytical interpretations. So what does what someone said mean against the context of your analysis of secondary sources, including the literature? And also consider power dynamics and representation in the sense that people might have very conflicting views of something, and it's important about the research to show that there are competing views. So when we keep that notion of egoistic pluralism of Chantal Mouffe in mind, conflict is not something like we want to see that those tensions and the conflicts in how people think about the topic and want to write about it in a qualitative research to make the analysis critical. It's critical means that you also put together, relate different viewpoints to each other, and to also form your own analytic interpretation of this. So in terms of social and spatial analysis in qualitative research, it's important to see how spaces and places shape identities and how they are performed to negotiate different contexts, how again power plays a role spatially. So what role do places play and spatial boundaries? There are social identities, and there's a lot where we are, how we feel, how we belong, but also spatial boundaries matter of the state, online, for instance, or where we move from one place to another. Next slide, please. No, we're wrapping up very soon. So it's important to balance the description, description and analysis. You should only tell, you should really explain, present a coherent narrative. And it's very productive in writing up qualitative research findings to present case studies, as you might rather want to have a very detailed, significant, in-depth discussion than a very generic coverage of your data. It's also important to maintain the confidentiality of the participants, following research ethics, and to deal with any sensitive topics with care accordingly. And in qualitative research, there are many ways of dealing with the analysis, but it's important to acknowledge the complexity of what the findings can mean, to acknowledge partiality as interpreting the data from a specific angle, and to avoid overgeneralizations. Next slide, please. And in the discussion, you link your findings to the literature, including the broader theoretical debates. And by doing so, you present the key conclusions, the main contributions to scholarship, but also, as we do as critical scholars, what was lacking, what were the limitations in our research, and what are the kind of recommendations or implications of our study. Recommendations or implications, for instance, to third-party actors or sector partners we're working with, but also research, future research directions. You've done something and where to go next. So by doing so, it's not just a summary of what you've done, but you present a synthesis. And as a final And some final considerations that we go to the next slide is to always think about when we write, and this not only applies to qualitative research, but also quantitative research. Who are we writing for? Well, of course, we have our supervisors sometimes, but it's important to adjust the style and the tone accordingly. It's also important to find your own voice. Sometimes we can stick too much to what others have said, trying to find your own voice in critical interpretations. And it's good practice to always be clear and accessible in the language that you use, and also adopt a clear structure so you can make your own thing. When you write, it's good to start with like a plan of your dissertation with clear headings, informative headings, and to move on accordingly. So that you, in a way, see your dissertation or your arguments evolving. So these are some pointers for writing up all the research. And lots of time is 2 minutes past 4. Hafidz, you want to can you use more time for questions now, or do you need to wrap up? Okay.
Oke, jadi dari tadi Martin menyebutkan bahwa di sisi findings, ya kan kalau kita ada findings atau hasil ya. Nah, ini penting untuk memberikan quotation atau kutipan yang menunjang narasi kita, yang menunjang hasil penelitian kita. Karena memang datanya itu kan statement, jadi harus ada statement yang menunjang apa yang mau kita klaim. Tapi dari statement tersebut memang harus dijelaskan bagaimana klaim yang kita buat itu berhubungan dengan statement. Misalnya si A ngomong sesuatu karena karena ada suatu hal yang terjadi terhadap si A tersebut. Karena si A itu merupakan member dari community group apa. Jadi memang ada konteksnya. Jadi bagaimana informan itu ngomong itu harus selalu diberikan konteks. Yang kedua, kita harus membatasi antara perspektif partisipan sebagai datanya itu dengan hasil analisis kita. Kadang-kadang memang kita memiliki kecenderungan tertentu untuk menyimpulkan sesuatu, sehingga perspektif partisipan ini kayak dianggap sebagai sebuah lewat aja gitu. Nah, memang harus balance. Jadi kita melihat apa yang partisipan lihat, tapi kita melakukan sintesis nanti di akhirnya. Nah, dalam konteks geografi, nah ini penting juga untuk mendeskripsikan bagaimana sebuah tempat, sebuah karakteristik wilayah itu mempengaruhi perspektif dari partisipan. Jadi bagaimana keterikatan dia terhadap sebuah lokasi itu artinya membuat dia berpandangan sesuatu. Nah ini harus di dengan jelas. Misalnya si A berpendapat sesuatu karena memang dia tinggal di tempat dataran tinggi. Karena terbatasnya sumber daya air di tempat tinggalnya si A, maka dia menganggap suatu isu itu sebagai apa gitu. Jadi memang harus dijelaskan. Dan yang terakhir memang kompleksiti atau perbedaan pendapat ini sangat penting untuk di state ya. Jadi memang kita ada kecenderungan untuk memilih suatu hal yang sesuai dengan point of view kita. Tapi kalau dalam pendidikan kualitatif itu memang kaya akan informasi. Kalaupun ada orang lain yang berpendapat sesuatu, memang harus di highlight. Gitu. Di perbedaan pendapat itu merupakan percaya kita. Jadi memang tidak memang perbedaan itu harus di capture. Nanti harus diisi tesis kenapa bisa ada perbedaan tertentu sehingga kesimpulannya seperti apa. Oke, teman-teman ada yang mau bertanya? Ya, apa-apa.
mengenai penelitian kualitatif apabila penelitian dilakukan di suatu wisata tourism. Dari sana itu sampingnya ada masyarakat dan juga pengelola. Apakah ada teori tertentu untuk mengambil sampling, to get the sampling for society and pengelola for the management of the tourism and any formula to get the sampling for them of the society and the management of the tourism. Any theory and formula, good formula for them. Thank you.
She's doing a research on the tourism destination. So she's asking about how to recommend it to us. Both from the management side, tourists or
Yes.
overall community.
Yeah, I first of all, interesting topic. Second, in qualitative research, the principle for the sample is called the data saturation point. So you speak with the number and the balance of participants until the point that you think that adding more interviews will not add further insights. So there's no formula. You cannot say you need to speak with X number of participants. But usually, depending on the type of study, so if you're doing an undergraduate study or a master's study or a PhD, there are different expectations about how many people you speak with. But theoretically speaking, you stop at the moment that you think adding more interviews or adding more discussions will not give you more perspectives. The question about who to interview, it's important to make a stakeholder analysis. So who are the important people to interview, and then you might want to have a balanced number of participants across those stakeholders. So if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. But some lecture also asking what the theory is from, I think. What the theory is from to get something for the management and the society that you get. Use my theory, not get the guidance theory from the professional.
Tadi sebenarnya malam itu bahwa tidak ada formula khusus dalam menentukan siapa yang diwawancara. Jadi memang dari itu kalau kita ada data yang itu aja, karena indikator kejenuhan itu kan memang beda layernya ya. Kadang-kadang kita merasa dalam suatu hal yang secara general itu sama, tapi kan di negara kecil mungkin ada berbeda. Nah, beda satu dan dua dan tiga mungkin ada perbedaan dalam hal itu. Kalau misalnya mungkin nanti misalnya di Indonesia ya, ada mungkin memiliki kesamaan tentang perspektif bagaimana jadi itu harus dikembangkan. Tapi kan misalnya menjadi ekonomi dalam misalnya satu itu cukup semua sepakat dia akan jadi ekonomi maka itu jadi. Tapi kalau misalnya memang kita politiknya seperti apa, bagaimana prinsipnya, terus siapa yang harus bertanggung jawab, kita kan mungkin ada perbedaan pendapat. Nah, itulah yang nantinya kejenuhan itu memang ada dari levelnya. Jadi silakan didefinisikan mau sekitar apa kejenuhan apa. Terkait dengan teori-teori, nanti juga person who can do something was
I would say INA. So if you go back these slides in the book about qualitative research methods in human geography, I find very helpful. So if we can go back to that book. So that's a book that I've been using for qualitative research. And that explains possible sampling strategies for qualitative research. So in human geography, INA, so qualitative research methods, it explains sampling strategies, different types of interviews, how to do it, and it's also not so thick, so it's very great for student audience from undergrad to PhD, but it's very clearly written. But the point is there's no single theory. There are different approaches to sampling strategies, but this is a very good work. And there are also journals, including Qualitative Research, it's a journal published by Sage, and there you can find a lot of articles on sampling and interviewing. But for geography in particular, this book is used a lot, at least in the UK as well. So, tapi mau kemudian itu bagaimana kita lihat bagaimana yang apa kira-kira sederhana kalau saya gunakan untuk mengecek kebenaran data dari negara.
I think about the evaluation. When we incorporate the different perspectives, how can we change? How can we talk about okay, so this is not really because we incorporate many kinds of perspectives.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the truth is there's no ultimate, like no one in terms of data saturation. So when we have identified themes in literature that we want to contribute to, it's important that the different types of data give a rounded perspective of those topics, and that is highly subjective, and unfortunately it remains subjective. Subjects and very sensitive to teach, meaning that different scholars goals. So that's why qualitative research is so important to explain research steps in such great detail for transparency, while acknowledging that if someone else do the research, they might come with a different perspective, but the pattern that we find in qualitative data analysis, there could be similarities across different scholars. But in terms of like when we reach the data saturation, probably not after one interview, depending on the research study, but at some point when you're doing the interviews, it might not always be clear when you're doing the interviews that you reach that number of interviewees that where after which you can stop. Sometimes in the process of analyzing the data, you find whether or not you have collected enough data. So sometimes it also happens that when you've done a set number of interviews, and you start analyzing them, then you discover there are still some gaps and you need to follow up the interviews. So yeah, it's not always a very linear process, or that you can go to the field, speak with people, go back again. And sometimes there are limitations in terms of respondents that you cannot access, so they need to acknowledge that you have data gaps. And sometimes you do not have the resources, the time, and the funding to get certain information, and that's then just the way it is, but it needs to be acknowledged. So yeah, when data separation is subjective and also subject to the resources that we have. As we're required to do PhD in 3 or 4 years, you need to collect quality to be realistic. So there are also practical considerations that apply how many interviews you can do. And if you, so for instance, in my research, when I'm doing studies on artist's point of view offers cities, sometimes it's only one artist, so then it needs to be as well. So then it's like a stakeholder interview or a people that we need to be only one person. But also research question matters a lot. If I'm interested in what members of the public think of the work, then actually not only am I to the artists, but also to the people who use the streets and what they think of the artwork. So the research question also defines who to interview and how many.
Oke, kalau pertanyaan memang sampai sejauh mana kebenaran itu, gitu ya. Memang tidak akan ada kebenaran yang mutlak, gitu. Kalau kita kualitatif, maka semua pasti itu tidak akan ada jawaban yang objektif. Sehingga di awal memang penting bagaimana subjektivitas itu kan untuk kita jelasin cara step by step menentukan informan, step by step menganalisis bagaimana statement itu menjadi suatu hal yang suatu hal yang simpulkan nanti di penelitian itu harus seperti itu juga posisi peneliti ya. Bagaimana kita melihat suatu hal yang memang terbentuk sebelum kita melakukan penelitian itu juga penting. Kapan ada tadi jadi ya kata nanti akan jadi saat kita hanya mewawancara satu orang karena itu jelas kita harus bertanya lagi. Tapi dalam proses menganalisis dalam sampel ini kita merasa juga nggak akan ada lagi yang bisa dieksplor dari aspek sana udah tahu, aspek yang lain udah tahu. Jadi selama masih ada penjelasan yang menurut kita kosong, kita nggak tahu jawabannya. Ya kita tanya terus, terus sampai kita tahu. Sehingga memang walaupun di awal kita definisikan lewat stakeholder analisis itu siapa yang akan diwawancara dan apa kapasitasnya, tapi dalam perjalanannya bakal nambah terus atau berubah. Gitu. Tergantung memang tadi proses mencapai kejenuhan dari data itu. Makanya memang harus dijelaskan lagi. Gitu. Nah, kalau dalam konteks S3 misalnya kita sudah melakukan pemanggilan data kualitatif dan jarang kita butuh mengambil data lagi. Karena memang pada saat pemanggilan data pertama kita analisis masih kurang di sini kita cek lagi ke misalnya perspektif orang lain, kita cek lagi ke perspektif yang lama gitu. Jadi memang cek lagi kita kesalahan lagi berulang lagi. Jadi memang tidak ada proses yang linear dalam analisis kualitatif. Misalnya kalau analisis statistik ya udah kita kan kumpulin data, kita analisis secara statistik, mengambil kesimpulan, interpretasi gitu. Kalau ini ya kita belum balik terus sampai memang seluruh aspek dari penelitian kita itu terjawab. Makanya research question ini memang sangat penting di awal untuk memberikan kita batasan, oke, kita mau sampai mana meneliti ini. Kalau enggak ya kita akan mengeksplor semua hal. Oke, akan ada pertanyaan lain. Apa juga actually
Thank you for the opportunity. For the opportunity, thank you to your presentation for providing information specifically about identity and citizenship. It will be related in Indonesia. As you know, this is working in the university in Pembangunan, and it expect to university. In one hand, it will organize the area and it will create many jobs, I think. On the other hand, it's potentially will marginalize the university for maybe they can follow the expected from organization and this what is your opinion about this case in identity and citizenship perspective? How does organization impact the price of the citizen rights?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, you asked me about the implications of moving the capital city from Jakarta to Kalimantan. I have little knowledge of the specifics of the tension and sort of current developments, but let me theorize about what it means to transfer economics to move the capital city for what it means to the citizens in the state. So first of all, the question is, for who is this capital city going to be? Is there a general interest among the population at large? What message does it want to send out to citizens of Jakarta? Is it really for everyday citizens, or is it like government move, or does the government want to reinvent itself? So what kind of image is to combine with the intention to move the capital, and the reality of climate change and considerations about moving the capital for environmental reasons. But yeah, there are different skills of analysis here, I think. So I don't know the specifics of the case, but I think there are different angles to look at this in terms of citizenship and identity. And that is, so whose ID is this, or whose? What does it mean to people in Jakarta themselves? So what does it mean for future residents of Kalimantan? What does it mean nationally, regionally, and also what does it mean to the world? Indonesia has made quite some news about the new capital, and might inspire others in the world, but also could create a new global image of Indonesia. So there are different ways of looking at citizenship and identity here, from this case of the move to the capital city. What do you think of it? What do people in the room think? What do you think of this particular move?
Jadinya pertanyaan paling penting di awal yaitu untuk siapa sebuah ibu kota itu direncanakan. Jadi kalau sudah dijelaskan untuk siapa, maka ya itu jawaban dan ada pertimbangan lainnya yang latar belakang pertanyaan tersebut. Ya, yang saya tahu sih kurang lebih seperti jawaban beliau di mana kita mendalam tentang topik ini itu jadi apa itu saja. So there will be another person that will be asking questions. Sekarang jadi have several questions. So this is one. You can topics your presentation. First one, actually, I'm quite like wondering because I know one of my friends is kind of taking this master in this like program from like a program partnership. I think it's kind of it's from master to the program. Is there any like the opportunity something like that? I know you can have this master in Newcastle. Is there any like kind of opportunity to the university? And is it like the program you are doing this earlier? Is it like a opportunity to like one is to like a program this university. I think like when it was I think yes. Also and the second one regarding like the specific topics really is quite a big topic for me. The first one regarding like the future of the citizens. We are also discussing about the national and statistics for this citizen.
from your perspective, actually, what is like marginalized citizens or like justice for the citizens, like the definition or the environmental sense, because I quite have a confusion with name theories and the last one again the qualitative research. Oh yeah, how we maintain the confidentiality for the academic environment. If we are academic research, they are quite specific and the environment is quite famous already, just like one environment. How to maintain like the confidence, yeah. And also, what is the meaning of like accessibility is in your tips regarding writing about academics. Thank you.
Yes, those are very interesting questions. Thank you. So the beginning with the scholarship and overall scholarship opportunities. Unfortunately, most of the research, so not for international students, but it's very open to get a scholar who are working in projects that the micros consortium offers studentships that are devised by students themselves, but they're also targeting home students, and they're also cooperating partnerships with the same problems there that is focusing on home-based students. So yeah, possibilities are very limited, unfortunately. The second question about marginalized citizenship. So how do I define that? Well, basically, all people who fall out of the norm. So in a normative sense, citizenship. So the government describe its own position, citizens in the state, and say it's all inclusive. Everyone is inclusive, but it might be that so I think marginalization should be analyzed and understood as certain level. It's a experience. You cannot tell someone else if they're marginalized or not. So marginalization means that there is a formally there might be regulations that are not acknowledging the rights. So people by experience exclusion from the corrected. So in other words, in times of austerity, like in the UK, social uncertainty has a lot of working people feel themselves social economy excluded, even marginalized. You know, like you protect the right welfare of our citizens, receive marginalized people. Marginalization means that opportunities are missed for people to feel out of place, but not feel themselves belonging to a certain group. Regarding your question about confidentiality and how to maintain it, so in the presentation of qualitative research, you got a lot of interviews, like stable analysis, you do maintaining confidentiality, size of this organization, you just mentioned organization, another role, so that you know, the identity of the in the case of only one interview, so if you say interviewing artists or artwork out on the street and everyone knows an artist, then the that their identity can be revealed in the analysis to achieve the usual agreements with the respondent that anonymity cannot be guaranteed, and that is a limitation of research. Otherwise, we always want to aggregate the data as much so that the individual identity of the respondents cannot be identified, and also it's always worth checking with the respondents themselves if there are any concerns about maintaining confidentiality. So when you present your research to the participants, what they can expect first, how you go about confidentiality. Against ethical guidance, so there's a mutual agreement that the respondent was fine with their identity disclosed. If that's approved by the research ethics assessor, then that's fine. But it can be tricky, especially when you are going to interview, let's say, the head of a certain department. So that's regarding confidentiality. Your one question related to accessible. Accessible language is written in such a way that when you introduce garments, very specific terms, and you said in the presentation today, they make clear to the reader what it means. So, triangulation, I think many of us do know that it means like several methods in relation to each other. Well, for some, explanations are provided. If you assume that the audience does not get it, or is aware of it, and also that those are studying all first mentioning. So just being to make sure text is legible by the audience. Accessibility is different things. Everyone is aware of the terms you know to explain it. Science for participation, very there's a set of expectations that you explain key words in depth in relation to literature, and by doing so, you make it accessible. So, any further questions? We did off our very privilege.
Oke, makasih teman-teman atas pertanyaannya. Dari cooperation and attention, for taking over the time, yeah, for cooperation.
Terima kasih.
Okay.